I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're exploring the fascinating intersection of medicine, history, and human survival at sea. The name of the book, Medicine at Sea. It's written by a terrific author. His name is Dicky Hill, and he presents a compelling, highly readable look at the role of medicine in maritime history, from groundbreaking discoveries to life or death moments on the open ocean. Whether you're a history buff, a medical enthusiast, or just love a great story, this book is packed with insights you won't want to miss. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Dicky, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
It's my pleasure.
This is a fascinating look at an area that many people might not have even thought about before. What sparked your interest or curiosity to write this book, Medicine at Sea?
Well, about 40-something years ago, I became a professor at the California Maritime Academy. Prior to my coming on board, they just taught a course in first aid and CPR. They wanted a medical course because these officers, both engineers and deck officers, when they go on these ships with 20, 22 people, generally someone has to be the medical officer. That's a requirement of all ships at sea. There has to be a designated medical officer. And they wanted their midshipmen to have a little better training. So I developed this course. There was no textbook for that course. The book they were using is this book here. It's called The Ship's Medicine Chest and First Aid at Sea. Now, when I started teaching in 1983, this book was published in 1955. Wow. And I can assure you, in 1955, it was already out of date. Yeah. So I had to develop a textbook at Medicine at Sea. The original book was about this big. This is the textbook that I used the first few years I was teaching at California Maritime Academy. Now, through a number of gyrations, this is the book now. It's a book that I've been writing for over 30 years, and it's a distillation of the 44 years I've spent in medicine. Now, the book is really a medical textbook. I tell you how to deal with problems when there's no medical care. Now, what I found, if you're going to teach people, especially sailors, medicine, something that they really have no interest in until they need it, you've got to give them a sea story. So I chose history as the vehicle to teach medicine. But this is very much a how-to book. It teaches you, when's abdominal pain serious? What do you do with a fever? How do you treat shock? How do you deliver a baby? There's a step-by-step section on delivering a baby at sea because we did a home delivery on our second child. The midwife did not show up. Now, I had delivered a number of babies as a Navy doctor, but I hadn't delivered a baby in 10 years. While I was delivering our daughter Denali, a friend of mine was reading from my book, Step-by-Step Delivery of Baby at Sea. Wow. Fortunately, the baby, like she had read the book, she did everything she was supposed to, step by step. So the book works if you ever have to deliver a baby.
Amazing, amazing. Whether at sea or on land, the book would help. I'd imagine not much difference there, right?
Right. If there's no medical care and you are it, what I tell the people at the beginning of every course and the beginning of this book, if you could step back in time to 1941, December 1941, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, and you had this book and you had a modern medicine chest, you would be one of the best medical officers in the world. You could do things that doctors could not do in 1941. Keep in mind, penicillin was in its infancy, and we really didn't know how to treat shock. So what's been developed since 1941 in terms of innovation, and a lot of it came from corpsmen in Vietnam that were out there in a firefight, a long way from a medical officer. They invented things like for posterior nosebleeds, decompression of a tension pneumothorax, opening the airway with a cricothyrotomy. A lot of stuff in medicine did not come from medical centers or medical professors. It came from innovative people that had to do it in the field.
Amazing. Yeah, emergency medicine is its own beast in many ways because you need to improvise, right?
Right. About a third of the book is emergency medicine. The other things I tell people that medical emergencies are extremely rare. I trained the largest, busiest military hospital in the world in the early 80s, Naval Hospital, San Diego. We saw 248 people every 24 hours in our emergency room. We maybe saw one medical emergency a week. So I tell people medical emergencies are rare at sea. However, there are no emergency rooms at sea.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. They might be rare, but when they happen, they're a real big deal. So you better have that book on hand to
Or
flip to
systems.
the right chapter, right?
The other thing I tell people in a medical emergency, you need to check your pulse first. If
Hmm.
your pulse is 160, you need to calm down. You're not
Yeah.
going to do someone any good if you are too excited. And in medical emergencies, just like we used to do some sailboat racing. Some people think the louder you yell, the better things get done. But in a medical emergency, if you start yelling and act unsure of yourself, it's not going to do the victim any good. There's all throughout history, there are examples of a confident touch. Just an injured person being touched confidently really goes a long way. So that's why I say take your own pulse first, calm down before you start making decisions, but at least touch the victim confidently. Let them know everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. Great advice. When you walk into an ER and you're riddled with gunshots, the doctor's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? You know, he assesses the situation, evaluates, and gets to work with the team, no doubt. You
Calmly,
emphasize, I'm sorry.
and do it calmly with confidence.
Exactly, exactly, yeah. You emphasize the role of illustrations in learning. How do visuals enhance the reader's understanding of medical concepts?
Well, I can remember back when this first edition of the book, several of my students told me, well, they were reading in the book and they turned a page that just print, and they turned a second page and they would just print. When they turned the third page and there were no illustrations, they got discouraged and closed the book.
Hmm.
So that's why I use a lot of pictures, because picture's worth 1,000
Yeah.
words, and there's always a story with the picture.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we live in a very visual age where people don't really
Absolutely.
read the text. They're looking for a photo or they're looking for a video or something. What are some of the biggest medical challenges faced at sea, either today or historically?
I think one of the scariest things at sea is abdominal pain.
Hmm.
The vast majority of abdominal pain is resolved. You just have to rest the bowel. Resting the bowel means clear liquids.
Hmm.
Don't insult the gut with anything complicated. Rest the bowel and then re-examine the bowel. One of my stories in the beginning of the book is about a fellow that was wounded fighting on Okinawa. He was a
Hmm.
tank commander, enlisted man. He was wounded on Okinawa. If you know anything about Okinawa, some of the worst fighting of the Second World War. In fact,
Yeah.
a 250,000 casualties assured we were going to drop the atomic bombs, because there was a 250,000 casualties on one island. Think what it would be if we invaded Japan.
Yeah.
But he was crossing the ocean in the mid 60s with his family, and his son, his 8-year-old son, developed abdominal pain, had a fever. And he said he was more afraid at that time than he ever was when he was wounded fighting in Okinawa, because he had like a little first aid kit with some betadine and a few band-aids in it. And in the mid 60s, there was no way he was going to be able to contact anyone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Now we do have ways to contact people. Some people have satellite phones. I had a single sideband radio on my sailboat when we lived on it. But what I teach and what the book says is you're really on your own. If you have a medical emergency at sea, the last thing you need to do is get on the radio. You need to take care of the victim, not get on the radio and get help, because helping you on the radio is going to be very minimum help.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to deal with what you have in your head and what you can see and what you can touch.
Great advice. Who should have this book? Anybody who gets on a boat?
I think that we live on an earthquake fault line. If there's something major happens here, the major hospitals will be dangerous. If something happens like the sun burps like it did in 1859 with the so-called Carrington event, if the sun just burped and hit us with a big bunch of plasma, it would knock out everything. It would knock out all the electrical, all the satellites, all communication. And when the toilets don't flush, you're on your own. So I really think, there was a time growing up that every home had a home medical book.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you were in a dugout in the plains of Oklahoma or you lived there used to be a home medical. Now,
Yeah.
You can get anything you want off the internet, but if the internet goes down, you need a way to deal with simple problems, simple wounds, things to deal with abdominal pain when it becomes serious. So I think everyone needs this book. And I'm not just saying that because if everyone had this book, I'd be a rich person. But it's not just for people at boats. I spend a lot of my time off the grid in northwest Sonoma County on 50 acres in the redwoods. We make our own electricity. We deal with our own trash. We go to the dump every 3 months. We have a garden. We have chickens. And I have like 4 years supply of food. So if something happened here and I can get to my farm, I can survive with all the things. I don't need to be plugged in to the grid or have access to a grocery store, to a filling station. And of course, I have a full medical clinic up there. And since I wrote the book, I know what's in the book. So
Yeah.
I think for people that are the so-called preppers, this is an ideal book for a prepper. It tells them exactly what they need to have in a medical kit, down to the infinite detail. What should you have in a medical kit?
Yeah.
Because without the medical kit, the book full of interesting things, but you need a medical kit to go with this book. And it tells you exactly what to put in the medical kit.
Wonderful. And we can't forget we just lived through the pandemic. And we were very lucky that, you know, untoward people didn't take down the internet during that time. Can you imagine living through COVID with no internet? But that's the
Well,
kind of thing that could happen, you know. So I think you're right. Have a book in print of medical advice and procedures like yours is a great tool to have in the house, right?
well, I used to be a Boy Scout, and the mainstay of the Boy Scout was be prepared.
Always be
Everything you
prepared.
learned in scouting went downhill from be prepared.
Exactly, exactly. Wonderful. The name of the book is Medicine at Sea. It presents a compelling, highly readable look at the role of medicine in maritime history. It also gives you practical how-to advice to deal with medical emergencies and situations that arise both on sea and land. The book covers groundbreaking discoveries as well as life or death moments on the open ocean. Whether you're a history buff, a medical enthusiast, love a great story, or want a great medical dictionary with practical advice at home, this is the book for you. Dicky, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, it was an honor to meet you, even though we didn't meet in person. If you find yourself in Northern California, give me a call.
Absolutely.
I'll take you on a boat on the bay.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it, my friend. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.